Now in landscape, a lot of the action, if you like, is taken from a distance. The monochrome tutorial, for example, most of the rocks or the hills in the background, you paint in a fairly general way. But as you saw with the rocks in the foreground at the near side of the lake, they can become quite detailed and in fact almost can become a subject in their own right. So what we're going to do is just have a look at very quickly how to paint a foreground round edged sort of rock and one that is sharp and angular, and then a little further on into the lesson we'll have a look at a couple of quick techniques for painting generalized rocks that are perhaps a little bit further back into the middle distance. Now I've sketched in very quickly and very roughly the angular rock and the rounded rock. Now for the angular rock you're probably best off using the flat brush. The square edged flat brush will give you those nice straight angles, those angular edges that you want. Let's have a look. We've got a greeny sort of grey colour overall the rock, so I'm going to use some yellow ochre. Here's a little bit of raw umber and we're going to add in a little bit of the ultramarine blue, a little bit of that glazing material, a little bit of white. Well, you can see I'm literally shoveling that up onto the 1/2 inch brush, and so I'm going to just scrape that in very quickly. If we have a look at the photograph, you can see the light is falling on this side of the rock and this area here is in some degree of shadow. So we'll lighten that off slightly. By painting this and getting used to the angles and the textures, it really will help you when you come to paint some more generalized, less detailed rocks. I'm bringing in some of the brown and blue now just to darken that off slightly. And already you can see the way that rock is appearing out of nothing. Now we can start to develop that. I'm going to use some cad yellow, some cadmium yellow here, a little touch of the ultramarine blue. That's going to give us a nice greeny grey. There we go, there's some darker streaks now like that. Make sure we keep this area quite dark around the back here because this is the bit that's in shadow. Let's have a look, there's a little bit of green just down that side there. We'll blend that in a second. Just take the paint off and then just drag that in. That's it, like that. I'm going to use the rigger now. The rigger isn't only good for fine lines. I'll just show you what I'm doing. I'm just putting the rigger into that blue there, taking a tiny little bit of the yellow. I'm just picking up some of that glazing material, just a little bit dark there. We'll just leave the rigger for now, and now I'll use this filbert because it's a bit smaller. It's perhaps easier to get into those sort of crevices. Just emphasize again some of those angles. Again, I'm just playing around to show you what you can do. What I think I'll do is add a little bit of white to that cadmium yellowy green that we've got, and let's put a few little highlights. If we can get it to sit. There we go. Here. So we'll stop there for now. What I am going to do is to just throw in a bit more of this cadmium yellow ultramarine blue mix and just make sure that we don't leave the rock floating in midair. There's some bits and pieces. We'll put a little bit of light coloured paint over the top, but you can see how easy it is to manufacture stones. Just tone that down slightly, and there's a rock. Easy. Let's move on now quickly to the rounded rocks. Right, if we have a look at the photo, we'll do that rock, but we'll use this colour. It just shows you can mix and match and use your imagination. The base colour is going to be a sort of a pinky grey. We've got a little bit of that cadmium red. If you want to lighten red, add a little bit of yellow to it. Okay, I'm not worried too much about getting the exact colours, as I said. What I'm going to do is to just bring in a little bit of raw umber to it. That's fine. You notice, as with the monochrome tutorial where you paint hills the way they go, then in the same way I'm painting the outline of the rocks roughly the way the strata runs. I'm going to add a little bit of reddy pinky orange there. Okay, I think this area here underneath is going to be in shadow. We'll have that side. This time we'll have the light coming from the top left. Okay, we're coming back to our friend the rigger, and this time I'm going to get some blue paint and some more of this red colour that we had. Some quite dark colour here, and this gives us these very dark ridges and fissures in the stone there, like that. Let's come back to the filbert brush again. Do a little bit of blending work there. You can see how easy it is to blend. Okay, don't forget this is in the shadow side, so it's a bit of darker brown paint. Just gives us this nice shadow areas. I'm going to just, as I've done with this, just finish off, put a little bit of dark area underneath and just some highlights on the top of the stone. I think we'll call that it. You can see I'm not being afraid to put sort of bold highlighted colour on. This isn't pure white, this is this colour plus a lot of white. So let's just do the stone or the ground underneath. There we go. We'll call that it for now. I think you've got the idea, the difference between how you create a round stone and how you create an angular stone like that. Now I'm just going to produce some very stylized, almost simple rocks that you can create with almost just one or two brush strokes. And what I'm going to do is just, we'll have them as brown and white. I'm just going to drag the brush in on one side with brown paint. You need a reasonably fluid paint to get away with this. It's no use trying to use very heavy body paint. There's a reasonably fluid brown, and we'll go in with a reasonably fluid white on the other side. So you've got brown and white. And then if you start off with the brown and then drag it out, you can see, you can, just by twisting the brush, you can create some very, very simple rocks. Right, now you can do it another way as well, where you can put the mid-tone in. I've put a blue-grey mid-tone and a beigey sort of, and then all that you need to do to turn them into something that's three-dimensional, the ultramarine blue and the raw umber, just mix that to a very dark blue-black almost, and we can just have that, create that as the dark side of the rock, and then with a lot lighter colour, and there's the rock. Similarly, we'll use that browny colour again, and this time we'll have the overlapping rocks so that you can see how they work in relation to each other, and just so that they separate from each other properly, there's another couple of rocks. That's a very simple way to do middle distance rocks. And finally, I just want you to have a look at this or these two pictures in relation to scale. You might wonder that, well, perhaps that's cliff's about 100 foot high maybe when these people get up to it. Here's a close-up of the same cliff. In the winter time as a waterfall comes over this, but here is a little figure that's actually climbing this rock face. Now all of a sudden, if I cover that figure, you can think, well, all right, that rock, you know, without having any other evidence, could be 10 foot tall, 6 foot tall, 20 foot tall. You suddenly put a figure in to create scale, and all of a sudden you realise how immensely tall this rock face is. If we go back, you can see that this little figure would be a tiny little figure here, and so rather than this being 100 foot high or whatever, it's actually nearly 250 feet high. Now, I've painted an outline of this massive rock face without any figures or animals or trees to give it a sense of scale, and to all intents and purposes you can see it looks the same size as these rocks and stones that I've just painted above it. How to paint angular, hard, jagged rocks, how to paint soft, rounded rocks, mix and match with your photographic reference. Don't be a slave to the photo completely. Use those and mix and match colours and angles and textures. Here we've got the middle distance generalised rocks, which still have enough detail in them to give a sense of light, mid-tone and shade. And then finally we have the rock strata and the sense of scale. So there we are. There's close-up rocks.